how in the world we can have that and then nobody knows about it and nothing is done about it?
Well, what we have in this country is a regulatory agency that is in control of radio frequency emission licensing at specific bands in the spectrum, as well as power levels that are permissible. It's called the FCC. The FCC is not a healthcare agency. It doesn't have one doctor on staff. It has no medical doctors on its payroll. The FCC guidelines are what govern what frequency you can broadcast at, whether you need a license, and at what power level you can broadcast at, and up to what limit is permissible. But they're not safety standards. They're exposure guidelines. So the vernacular is very important. There's no implication of safety. The FCC guidelines do not claim to protect anyone. By their very nature, they're guidelines. They're not safety standards. So what we have are regulatory agencies in this country. The FDA doesn't regulate radio frequency emissions. It's left to a regulatory agency that is largely owned and controlled by the telecom industry and lobbyists for the telecom industry. And our government leaders are bought and paid for lock, stock, and barrel by these people. Bottom line. So what you have is you have unfettered access to the airwaves at a certain power level and at a very specific frequency range that has now crept in all around us, and it's all perfectly legal. That is a nightmare. Because now you're not only dealing with the fact that no one's breaking the law, unless, of course, some of these cellular companies are not monitoring the power levels of some of these wireless infrastructure systems that they have, because I'm sure some of these towers are broadcasting over and above the allowed power limits. I'm sure they are, but nobody's checking them. And, of course, it would take a Wi-Fi router, 10,000 times of a power increase to break the law. But we have studies that show harm, peer-reviewed studies that show harm, that show cancer. I mean, you've got women who've been keeping their phones in their bras, and they're getting breast cancer right in the exact spot where the cell phone antenna. I mean, if you have a smartphone, that thing's pulsing every 10 or 15 seconds, looking for the tower, picking up an email, transmitting data. You have a pulse-modulated microwave radio frequency emission taking place with peaks that are literally trillions of times background level right on soft tissue. And we all know that the breast tissue, it has a lot of fat cells in it, so it's very receptive to microwaves. You have women that are getting cancer right on the spots where the phones were kept. You have people getting brain tumors right where the phone's kept. Of course, the court system and the lawyers are going to split hairs on this all day long and defend and protect the telecom industry's interests, because look what's at stake. What's amazing to me, and this is something that really, really gets me upset, if not infuriates me, is how everyone talks about cell phones. And everyone talks about cell phone guidelines, cell phone right to know, cell phone exposure, cell phone use, cell phone. What about the millions of children every single day that are forced to use an iPad at school? Do you realize when you have a child sitting in a classroom with the iPad, which is now what is going on in the Fullerton School District where I live, which we've tried to fight and tried to stop. You have 35 children in a classroom with the equivalent of a cell phone in use all day, sitting right next to each other, with two, in some cases, high-powered wireless access points in that classroom. That is an unprecedented exposure. It is an unprecedented environment, and it is being done to our children. And it is not by choice. It is a forced exposure. You cannot get an education in the Fullerton School District without using an iPad. They have put that in writing. So this is a forced exposure at a frequency, at a radio frequency power level that has been shown to be causing cancer. But my concern is when you have a radio, a transistor radio, the antenna is always up here because the tower is over there. An iPad has several antennas, and the Wi-Fi antenna is at the bottom, right here, when the router's on the ceiling. Why would you not put the antenna up here? If you put the Wi-Fi antenna at the bottom,